the year has flown by, but I'm excited because I get to talk about episode 4 this week and welcome in to all of our KNC community. Surprise! We're
Yeah.
on, it's Monday, and I'm excited because we have some really good things to talk about today. I'm joined by episode 4's guest, Mrs. Vicki Keyes. She's a therapist. She's also the owner and founder of Vicki Keyes LLC. And Miss Keyes, I'm so excited that you are featured on episode 4 of Kingdom and Culture podcast.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yes, I am. I am thrilled that you were able to. And I know I said at the beginning of the episode when you guys watched the podcast this week, I said, y'all, we about to have our souls fed, and that's exactly what happened on the episode. So I'm just excited to have it here, and and have you on as a part of the platform. Why don't you tell our listening audience a little bit about your background, and then let's get into some of the topics that we covered during the podcast.
Okay, so I'm a 33-year teaching veteran, and I got my life coaching certification recently when I came out of the classroom. And now I'm serving as a middle and high school counselor / coach.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I do is this workshop called the Whole Student Workshop, and I help as a means of professional development. Educators have healthier conversations with their students, and particularly in the area of anxiety. So I'm an anxiety coach, and I have 78 students that I'm working with.
Wow.
And this is a very needed area because anxiety is one of the leading diagnoses in the United States right now. And
Mm-hmm.
the numbers have been rising since the onset of COVID. So I'm an author and speaker, and I'm excited to share some of the tips that you might find helpful, you as a parent or you as an educator, anybody who works with students actually. I
Yeah.
think you'll find some of these tips very helpful, and that's one of the best things about anxiety is the education. You got to know what to look for, and then
Mhm.
you need to know better ways to respond and help. So I think today's
Absolutely.
broadcast is going to have some really good notes. So get your pen out or
Mhm.
get your take some notes because I
Yeah.
think you'll want to remember some of these.
For sure, yeah. And we talk about what we said in the notes here, which is anxiety's top 10, right? We jump into really identifying what are those triggers that we should be aware of for ourselves and for others. And
Mhm.
to your point, it's a big deal because over the past 3 years, we've been in a pandemic, which most of the people listening on this call have never experienced before, a pandemic, especially a worldwide pandemic. There have been some over the centuries, but definitely in our lifetime, the first pandemic like this that we've had to experience. And, the sense of loss, the sense of grief, the sense of um, just loneliness that people have had to endure is one thing. And I think as adults, we have built up coping mechanisms throughout the years. But for children who, are still developing those traits, it's really been, I'm sure a godsend for your schools to have you in that place. And so, specific to children, we talk a lot in the podcast about adults, and we make it relative to whether you're in a work environment or whether you're in a home environment. But I want to spend a few minutes on some of the things specific to not children's. And you have two different segments. You have the whole the whole student project, which is focused on having the student become, I'm assuming, a whole person.
Yes, and then the part that goes with that is for the parents, and it's more community centered,
Awesome.
and it can be a school community,
Okay.
and it's parenting for students with anxiety because what I do in one of the workshops is we go over the common misconceptions that people, whether parents or whether administrators or educators, can make about students, so they can say, wow, this student is always late. They are just
Mhm.
so lazy, you know. And
Right.
if that's your perspective, you have to be careful, because to misperceive is to deceive.
Mm-mm.
And it could just be that they're really struggling with anxiety, and they are struggling with absenteeism, or,
Yeah.
tardiness, always, late, because they are just struggling to get to school, because they are filled with anxiety about it.
Yeah.
And then there's things that go on in the home. So there are relationship dynamics. You have students now who have come back to school. Well, we've been out for a year and a half to 2 years, and
Right.
that pace while we were out was not the pace that they're in now. And then
Right.
they have these learning gaps that they've had.
Right.
So a lot of students come in, and, for example, let's say somebody has to do a paper, and then
Mhm.
they have to present on that paper. And they just, it's just normal to have, speaking, anxiety before you get up. You get that nervous feeling before you
Right.
get up to
Right.
speak in front of a group. But now, now they have, this added pressure of feeling stressed about just all the steps that it takes to write that paper, because
Right.
it's almost like they've been undisciplined,
Mhm.
really, for a year and a half. And now
Sure.
you have these gaps. So now let's say you had a gap, and let's say one of those students that came back, and they had a gap in some of the math, and now the concepts are harder.
Right.
It takes longer, and they don't really get it. They're not really understanding. You can't always go to the teacher for everything.
Right.
And so the further they get backed up, the more anxious they're feeling, and it's just overwhelming. And then you throw all the different classes together.
Hmm.
But these are some of the realities that our students are facing, you know
Right.
and you can tell it in the
Right.
countenance. Like, some of them have a real repressed kind of look, kind of sullen looking, not really as enigmatic and joyful and talkative as in times before the pandemic. So
Hmm.
you really have to be able to look for some of these social and physical changes that are going on, and not be so assumptive that it's the student's laziness, or that they're having some drama, or what is this other word, extra, they're being an extra. And these are
Yeah.
the quantifiers that we have based on an uncaring or insensitive perspective.
Wow.
Even if you want to go spiritual on that, you go, well, you just really need to get over it, and you need to just walk in your faith.
Hmm.
But they actually need some coaching to help along with that, because there's these aspects in their soul that, like you said, some of them don't know how to develop their own coping mechanisms. Some of them don't have that strong enough relationship with God. And you have some students that don't even have a relationship with
Right.
God.
Right.
And
Right.
so they're just really out there, stuck in their own thoughts. If they have anxious thoughts and they don't know how to calm them down, they don't know what to do to, deep breathing, or get up, take a fresh air.
Sure.
Sometimes you have limitations and you can't go outside the classroom. Maybe you can't even go to the restroom at that time. It may not be one of those times in class that you can do that.
Yeah.
So, there's so many pieces that fit together that these students are looking for a little bit of calm, a little bit of backing that pace off. And
Sure.
not everyone is impacted, but it's a strong
Yeah.
impact right now.
For sure. And so in the podcast, we identify the top 10 signs of a anxiety, whether you're a student or an adult. And I'll just run through them really quickly: emotional
Okay.
changes, social changes, physical changes, sleep disturbance, poor, school performance or performance, panic attacks, school refusal, tantrums, obsession with perfection. Accustomed to assuming the worst is the last one. And so, which one of these do you see most in students, or is it a hybrid?
I'm seeing a hybrid. I'm not seeing a lot of tantrums. I'm
Okay.
really not. I am seeing some social changes. Like, I'm seeing that very commonly, that, kids just, they need a break, and they're like, I'm not really doing that. They're just pulling themselves away, and just,
Yeah.
isolating, getting alone, to
Right.
kind of, the word is chill, or just kind of calm down. But yeah, I'm seeing more social changes
Sure.
than anything. And some of them are not really wanting to do all the extracurricular things that they used to do.
Yeah.
Definitely, that pace is
Okay.
definitely an area of anxiety.
Okay.
That whole so definitely I've seen some physical changes and
Mhm.
some sleep disturbances.
Yeah.
I've definitely emotional changes. So
Okay.
emotional and social changes, I'm seeing the majority.
Gotcha. Okay.
And
Yeah.
I do have a percentage of panic attacks.
Okay.
That's a real
Yeah.
thing that's going
Right.
on.
Yeah, and I think the big thing that we talked about was, regardless of if you find yourself as a student, if you're listening to this and maybe you're a parent, um, find the place of resources. If you identify with one of these, I put Mrs. Keyes' website in the chat so that you can go to her website and send her an email so that you can contact her to follow up. And you talk about, rather, Miss Keyes, in the podcast, your own journey to healing that you had to really walk through over many, many years, and that you're still really a part of this discipleship group for Christ. And which is where you got some of your certifications and things like that. Can you talk briefly about the classes that the organization, and some of the classes and resources that they offer?
Absolutely. So one of the first classes that I took, and it's now changed names,
Mm-hmm.
but I started off with a 30-week group and a leadership group. And that part was called Understanding Emotions and Grieving Losses.
Okay.
Now, then they consolidated that. And what they did was, 30 weeks, a lot of people did not, have that kind of time to commit.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So they brought it into a processing pain program that is about 15 weeks long. And now they have that in Zoom groups as well.
Okay.
And they break you out by gender, females together, males together.
Mm-hmm.
And they generally do not put family members together, so that everyone can have their personal space and
Love
can
it.
have a safe place to heal, that
Mm-hmm.
they really can, be free to express themselves and to share examples. They're
Right.
not forced to share. It's all a will-based kind of program. And
Mm-hmm.
it is a covenant community. So there are covenants that do govern safe behavior and what is defined as safe behavior. I really appreciate that.
That's
So
awesome.
in addition to that one, that processing pain is great. Understanding emotions was a very good class for me, because we got to sit in every single emotion and work through that all the way back, from childhood to presenthood, to
Sure.
find examples of times that you might have had struggles or difficulties with those. And as you all know, sometimes there are some areas in our life that trigger that, and I'll explain what a trigger is. It's like a very sensitive area that you
Mm-hmm.
find yourself easily upset by, or defending yourself if somebody says something that hurts you or shames you or offends you in
Sure.
an area, and the next thing you know, you are standing up against them. And it's like offense defense, like the sport. And it can be really hurtful. You find yourself in a really hurtful place, and sometimes you need to work back and find out what was your first encounter with that, and
Sure.
what kind of relationship did that start at. And I like to explain it like this, and I did use this example actually today with one of my students. I said, if you have a dirty pair of socks and they're just dropped down on the floor in your closet, but that's the only pair of socks you have in that pile, it's not as big of an issue. And if so, the first time that something happens, you may feel a little upset or a little hurt by it. But
Okay.
as the same incident piles up, you ever seen a pile of dirty laundry, and you got your jeans on there, your sweatshirt on there, now your other items, and you have a whole
Oh
stack.
yeah. Right.
All of a sudden now, when you have that pile, that's a whole nother impact. Now when that incident comes around, it bothers you just like the depth of that stack. It's going to bother you
Mm.
more, and you become more sensitive, more upset, more angry, more furious about it. And so you can more, reclusive about it, more
Sure.
tendency to withdraw. So when we can, search it back out and get to the root of what really happened the first time. I
Yeah.
mean, what was going on with the first time that you were hurt and the first
Mm,
time you were ashamed when you just had that pair of socks that was just one incident of this. But
right.
as time went on and you found yourself in a pattern of having that same response to things, that response can become more and more, involved, deeper, more aggressive. And
Sure.
we need to look at, those patterns. And I like that because we do that in that class and we sit in every
Okay.
single emotion because, sometimes one of the things I do in my workshop is I also cover, the family,
Okay.
because for in some families, certain emotions are acceptable, others are not. And in
Hmm.
some families, emotion is acceptable, period. So it's hard to get in tune with how you're feeling. You might just be going off on somebody and have no idea what even is going on with you because you've never been allowed to feel.
Right.
So you
Right.
have to sit there and you have to process the difference. So I do this thing in a workshop called I Think I Feel, and I give people examples of that and have them to interact with the differences so that they can actually say, oh, that's the difference between something I actually, because people will say,
Mm,
I feel like, this is not right when they do this.
yeah.
That's not a feeling at all. That's a
Hmm.
thought. So just helping people with,
Yeah.
understand the difference and allowing them to think and feel
I
so
love.
that they can find exactly where they are. And then let's look back at where this began and, how intense is this? Let's rate that on a scale of 1 to 10, 10
Right.
being high. What was the last time this happened and this trigger happened? And then
Right.
what level was your response? If you saying a 10,
Yeah.
oh no, I was an 11, girl. I was just livid by the time they did that. You go, that's probably not the first time this has happened to
Yeah.
you.
Oh, so
And
good.
we need to get to the root of it. So, and then once you get to the root of it, and then we begin to make changes in how we're going to respond, because we can, once we understand what's going on, now you say, well, you actually have an empowerment to do hard things, and give them examples of times in their lives where they did do something hard. And you go, well, controlling your emotions and controlling how you respond, you really do have authority over the way you think about things and the way you feel about things. So all of
So
that's all part of the coaching strategy.
awesome. Yeah. And we jump into a lot of those concepts and principles during the podcast. So you got it, guys. When I say you have to check it out, please do do yourself, do your friends, your family members, people in your community a favor and check out episode 4 coming dropping this week. You guys know Thursdays at 6 a.m. the podcast will be live. And I'm so excited because, we need to do the work, and I was so excited because in our lives, one of the things the Lord's been challenging me with kingdom and culture is, a lot of times we focus on like business principles and we'll talk about those things. We want to do that, but he's been saying, what does the inward look like, right? Because you can only be so great outward as what our insights look like. And so we got to kind of stay in tune with our emotions and also, our children as we continue to raise and rear them, having resources like Mrs. Keyes. She also has, I'll put it in the chat, a amazing YouTube page where she has multiple videos on here. Topics like sitting too long with your emotions and even stroll in the garden. Um, the robe to recovery, everything you need to know about people's intentions. So check those videos out. Her link is there in the chat. And Mrs. Keyes, I'm just so excited that you chose to be on the podcast, and you
Thank
just got
you.
so many jewels, and so I really, really appreciate just everything, all the life that you brought to that conversation.
Oh, thank you for that. And I was going to say that there was one more class that I highly recommend if you
Sure.
are like, well, I don't have 15 weeks, but I probably could do something like 8 weeks. The healthy relationships class is incredible
Okay.
because, a lot of times that's where we get the whole tension thing going is
Mm,
in relationships. And so if you need
so
a
true.
shorter read, or if you have a group that, of friends that just want to get together and just kind of co-facilitate, you're like, okay, we need this. What book are we reading next? It's
Yeah.
a workbook, but I highly recommend it.
Now, is that where can our viewers and our listeners take advantage of that?
So you look on the Worldwide Discipleship Association website, and you look under their curriculum, and you choose healthy relationships. And it's a workbook. You can order it without taking a class, and you can get together with a group of ladies, a group of your friends, a group of ladies at church. You can actually mix that class, healthy relationships. You can have men and women together. You know, if you all are not going to get in there and try to fix each other, like if you get spouses in there and you're going to be distracted by, you need to really listen to that, then that's not the right group, because you're not going to be able to get the healthy relationship. You're not going to be able to get the most out of that class, that session. So I recommend
Well,
that.
I'm putting it in the chat here though, with the link to the healthy relationships training, and we'll also put it on the Kingdom in Culture website. All you have to do is click in there and go to Mrs. Keyes' landing page, and you'll be able to see all the really great resources that she's made available to us. So, Miss Keyes, I love you. Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to your podcast this week.
Thanks. Me too. Thanks again.
All right. Talk soon. Love you. Bye.
Okay. Love you. Bye-bye.